Zatanna is a character who has been around since the Silver Age, and since her debut, how prominent she's been has varied. The 2020s seems to be an era, time of recording, where she's having another bit of a moment, appearing prominently on teams and in her own set of mini-series. The most recent time of recording is from the DC All-In era. The DC All-In era began in 2024 and continued on through 2025, and this series asks an interesting question. Does Zatanna need a better rogues gallery? Now, this question wasn't asked directly, but it was brought up by the creator of this latest Zatanna mini-series, both the writer and the artist Jamal Campbell, when he was asked why he created a new villain for this mini. That villain is the Lady White, who debuted in issue 1 of this series. So I wanted to take a look at this issue and also examine the question of, does Zatanna need better rogues? I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's ponder. First, a Cliffnotes overview of Zatanna and her history with the villains that she does have. Zatanna debuted in Hawkman number 4 in 1964, in the story The Girl Who Split in Two, written by Gardner Fox, with art, inks, and pencils by Murphy Anderson. In it, Zatanna was on a quest to find her father, and this quest would see her as a guest appearance across several books. The Atom, Green Lantern, Detective Comics for Elongated Man, not Batman, and finally it would all culminate in Justice League 51 in 1967, in the story Z as in Zatanna and 0 Hour. This is also written by Gardner Fox, this time with art by Mike Sekowsky and inks by Sid Green. And all of this starts Zatanna off in an interesting character position. Firstly, it ties her firmly to other characters, but it also showcases how the universe is interconnected and how that can be a strength. And that would continue on, for Zatanna would rarely be featured alone. After finding her father, she would take up being a stage magician with real magic, and then she would help people when it was needed. But aside from gaining a long-lasting for a time support character in Jeff Sloan, these still occurred in other people's books. She didn't have her own, so she'd be there with Supergirl or Green Arrow. Sometimes she would have solo backup issues in Adventure Comics or Action Comics. There they would often be more a general magic threat, or also a team up. So when it came to taking down villains, oftentimes it was either villains that hero was already encountering, or some kind of joint, potentially vaguely magical threat. The next time most tend to remember her from in the Silver Age heading towards the Bronze is from the Justice League, because she was invited to join. This is in Justice League of America 161, where she shows up in a new costume that is later revealed to be her mom's outfit. So the Justice League of America means a team that she is once more on, and it is fitting because it harkens back to how she first appeared. Now, while she was on the team, she would have plots that would focus on her, and she would also have some significant costume shifts. And these things would revolve around some of the mysteries of her past, and they would tend to revolve around her parents. Specifically, her history as being part of the Homo Magi through her mother, Cindella. So even when she had battled Allura in early days back in Justice League 51, she's fighting a villain who is tied to her and important to her, yes, but also tied to her parents. So it's not just her. And some feel that for it to be a true rogue, it needs to be just for her. Part of why she got the new costume in Justice League 187, in a costume designed by the late great George Perez, was actually to break her away from her parents' identities and try to forge her own. All that aside, what this means is that there is an acknowledgement that she as a character was tied to others even in universe. And just as before, because she's on these teams, most of the villains that she fought would be associated with the team, or she'd be helping one of the other heroes fight one of their villains. She would team up with Wonder Woman a lot in her later League days, which is also part of what's going on in the Rebirth era decades later when they start to have the two of them team up. It's a bit of a reference callback. So because of this, the villains that she takes on in Justice League of America or Justice League Detroit tend not to be all that remembered. Her having to fight a dark version of herself packed a bit more of a punch than, say, the Shrieker. And then would come her entanglement with Constantine, which would not only be part of the arc that killed her father, but would also give her a whole new bunch of villains to fight, but this time more tied to him. Now, while it's not overly remembered, there was a time when Zatanna was living with a roommate, Sherry, and then she came to battle with the villain Atom, who was a cultist. But it was very brief. They ended up being friends until he died. R.I.P. And before that roommate arc, there was a bit of a time where she was a mystical guardian of the earth. There's a bit of bouncing around with her at the late Bronze Age leading into Crisis, where they're not entirely sure what to do with her. And it even continues a bit post-Crisis. And from there, what people tend to remember, where they start to really hone in on her again, is Identity Crisis. This is where it was revealed she was doing all those mind wipes. There were several retconned in mind wipes, and it ties back to a Bronze Age story, Justice League of America, in the issues 166 to 168. It's kind of fill a plot hole because all the villains swap bodies with the Justice League, but there's no mention made once they swap back about secret identities or anything like that. And from Identity Crisis, there's one specific era where she really starts to pop. Now, Zatanna has always had fans, dedicated fans, and one of those is Paul Dini of Batman TAS fame. He also did a stint writing Detective Comics. And one thing about Paul Dini is, if there's a story and Zatanna can be put in it, get ready to see Zatanna. And he would be the one to give Zatanna the one villain that tends to spring to people's minds in general. I'm sure there are exceptions. I'm sure some other people are thinking about Gwydion from the Seven Soldiers time. Dini would actually end up getting a Zatanna ongoing series going in 2010. This was her first ongoing. She had a mini-series, Come Together, in 1993, and also a special in 1987. His series ran from 2010 to 2011, so up until the DC line-wide reboot with the New 52. And this was Zatanna, front and center. We've done a retrospective on it, I'll link it down below. And while she was still tied to the universe and her father, it did strive to give her some of her own things that were truly her own, like her well-earned fear of puppets, or the villain, Brother Knight. Brother Knight, or Eldon Peck, was firmly a Zatanna problem, even if her father did know him. He was the demonic crime boss. He was secretly the father of the detective that Zatanna was helping because she was sometimes helping out the police during this. He gained a cult following in prison. He was a problem. He was arguably the biggest recurring problem she had in that series. And he was still a menace at the end of it. As mentioned, 2011 brought the New 52, and with it came new backstories and status quos for characters. Now, Zatanna wasn't tweaked too much, but she did lose some of her rich history, or at least it wasn't mentioned until later on going forward, because part of what was going on with that universe was to try and make it feel new and approachable. It also firmly solidified the past of Bruce and Zatanna. Paul Dini must be thrilled. Once more in this universe, she was more team-based. Her 2025 mini firms up that she did work with the Justice League, but for the start of the New 52, where most people may remember seeing her from, is Justice League Dark. That was the magic one. The New 52 would continue on into Rebirth, and in general, Zatanna would once more be tied to teams and the magic community at large. As a result, once again, most of the threats she faces are either threats to magic users in general, or the universe through magic, or tied to a team that she's on, or her father, or Constantine. This time, one of the villains she has is actually both of their exes? How do you conjugate that? His name's Nick Necro. Great name. Now, there were some standouts from this time period. Some highlight the Upside Down Man, who she would come into contact with multiple times, but because that started on Justice League Dark, some wonder, is that a Justice League Dark villain, or is that a her villain? For the character to be firmly tied to one individual hero, do they have to meet them in their own solo series? Lots of things to ponder. But she's still not a character with a lot of villains with specific grievances tied to her, or even the city she's in. So it's not like Batman or the Flash or even Wonder Woman. I say or even Wonder Woman because Wonder Woman has villains that are clearly hers, and she's said in just general conversation to have one of the weaker rogues galleries out there. It's a point that's up for debate. Some will debate that. But when it comes to the question, does Zatanna need a better rogues gallery? On the surface, the quick answer is yes, since it's quite hard to think of villains for her off the bat. However, there is a follow-up question to that, which is, but why though? Why does she need a rogues gallery? What is the goal for Zatanna overall? Zatanna is so integrated into the DC universe as a whole, and the question becomes, is that a problem? Does she need to be broken off and given more of her own things? If one is trying to make her a more prominent independent hero, then potentially. And DC has been foregrounding her a bit more in the 2020s, and not having her own specific villains could be something that could hold her back. Again, potentially. Because she is so interwoven, one can pull from anywhere and many of the characters would fit. Part of what makes Zatanna work and what makes her so interesting to so many is the complex relationships she has in the DC universe and her connections. And because of her skill set, she's versatile and she can face a whole host of villains and threats. And this also isn't to say that she's never had her own villains develop for her, because she has. It's just more to say that most have not stood the test of time in terms of either the general public mindscape or even the more casual comic fan mindscape. And even some who've been fans of Zatanna for years say that they can't really think of firm villains that they would associate with her, Brother Knight aside. Also, some will throw out Allura. So having a few more of her own specific villains couldn't hurt, especially if they're cool. I mean, if it's bad, it could hurt a little, but then they can be thrown to the memory pits, which will hopefully not be the fate for the 2025 Jamal Campbell series. The statement that was the impetus for this video came from a DC Nation Spotlight interview with Campbell. There was a question about creating the Lady White, and the statement was, "The Lady White was born from a desire to bolster Zatanna's rogues gallery with some fresh blood. She mirrors Zatanna in that they are both of the entertainment industry and exhibit a penchant for flair and the dramatic." It was the bolster that some honed in on and not the fresh blood, because the fresh blood implies that there are people there, but some felt that the bolster was unwarranted because they didn't feel there was anything to bolster. But what of issue 1? Time for recording, that's what we have to look at. And it's usually where people make the choice as to whether they will continue on with the series or not. So let's take a look. Also, spoilers. Now, this mini is set to be 6 issues. Of course, we'll see what happens. Either more or less. You never know. The comic opens with a fairy tale, or so it seems. Although based on the art, it's telling a story that has to do with the Homo Magi. You can see their costumes. That's the race that Zatanna's mom hails from. The story features a princess who is separated into 2. Now, having to face one's dark self is something Zatanna has had to do, but it's also a significant part of the history with Allura. Allura was 2 beings, but really 1. There were 2 sides. There was a good Allura and a dark Allura. Some do feel, despite being interwoven with others from Zatanna's past, she's still Zatanna's best enemy. Also, the webtoon Zatanna and the Ripper used her. It was the evil one who cursed Zatara to not be able to see his family. That's why Zatanna was looking for him back in the Silver Age. All of this would be revealed over time. Now, the way that it ended for Allura and Zatanna was that it didn't really. They had a huge confrontation in the Zatanna special. But Zatanna escaped by the end and then was just kind of left there time of recording. Because this was also early into the post-crisis era, where all of the universe had been crunched down into one. Zatanna's lived through a few of those. Now, the story that we're looking at, the fairy tale, is the past, then we get to go to the present. Zatanna is shown remembering her past, the deaths of her parents, the Justice League, her various friends and guises, some as tarot cards, which was a nice touch. It's a very quick double-page spread, but nice for those familiar with her history and intriguing for those not. Zatanna is once more living her stage life. She's got a new theater that she's at. Now, some of the stage assistant characters you see here are from the Dini series. Mikey was a big standout there, and she's here, and she still looks almost identical to the Carpenter. There is also a stagehand named Adam. He gets the most panel time of the new characters in issue 1, and I'm curious to see if he's meant to be tied to the first Adam, who's a cultist, or if it's just a coincidence that they have the same name. Now, the theater that they're working at is old. It boasts a long history. That includes not only having her father perform there, but also the Lady White. The Lady White is a known past celebrity, a vintage actress. Now, a lot of these pages are just beautifully paneled. The flow of action, the way it drives your eyes forward and around the pages, the way it's meant to, it's very smooth. There are pages where dialogue or narration boxes aren't even needed. Jamal Campbell is primarily a comic book artist. It's also helping the flow of the story. That's not always the case. There is a bit more of a skew towards the art, but not to the point where the story is not being told. It's nicely blended here. There's also some really nice foreshadowing when she's practicing her act with Adam, and he stabs her in the harness, but the harness fit is kind of off, and so it actually hurts. The page where Zatanna demonstrates some sleight of hand and magic works to both elaborate on the Lady White and foreground Zatanna's philosophy and her ties to the world of illusion. It's just an excellent set of pages. It accomplishes so much, and it's also just a pleasure to look at, and the way it's walking you through it, well done. If you keep believing that you don't deserve to be here, that lie will become truth. And it is a lie, Adam. The crew believe in you. The guys of the Oblivion believe in you. I believe in you. Use that belief to mold your reality and make some magic. Thanks for that, Miss Zatara, but next time maybe don't base your pep talk on how great of a liar you are. You know? Fair. The reader learns that at the height of her fame, the Lady White vanished. And that's her cue to appear and terrorize the crew and take them all to the astral plane. Now, the setup for the Lady White, of her as a vintage Hollywood actress, also has her positioned as a bit of a unicorn, that she wasn't typecast and she could just be in any type of film. And if one is willing to suspend and go on that journey, which most likely will be able to, it allows one to enjoy why that was the setup. It's so that in the astral plane, one can go into all different types of movies and sets. All the different genres, the different fonts, it's having fun with it. As Zatanna has to hop around rescuing her crew from these various scenes starring the Lady White. It's very colorful, very fun, and a controlled kind of chaos that's still visually easy to navigate. Her last stop is a noir, and that's to get Adam, which has probably the most extra moment in the issue when she catches a bullet with her teeth. You've had your fun, Lady White, but I don't appreciate you putting my crew in danger. Now I've heard stories about you, stories of your life, stories of your death. Why don't you tell me another? Why did you drag yourself out from your eternal sleep to come after us? This is interesting to ponder because earlier when the crew was talking about the Lady White, they said that she vanished like mist. So the question about Zatanna saying this is that, is this just a general people are talking and she's heard things? Has she heard something more specific? Because there's meant to be a bit of a mystery as to why the Lady White is after her here. Or is this just a case of the dialogue not entirely aligning? It could be anything. Simply for the opportunity to witness your expression at this precise moment. And so Zatanna is stabbed by Adam through the heart and the back. And as she whips around, the Lady White whispers something to her that just takes her out. Done, Mr. Zatar. Fun won't disappoint. And so she's left on the astral plane wounded, and that's the end of issue 1. The first issue is a lot of fun. If you like Campbell's art, it's gorgeous. And even if one doesn't, different strokes for different folks. It's a well-organized and laid out book that is mindful of the amount of text needed to get a story across and minimizes it where possible for large art pieces. It moves at a fair pace, but it also does give you a sense of where Zatanna is at, and it has these moments that will pay off for longtime fans, but they aren't alienating for newer fans. It also manages to set up all you need to know about the mystery surrounding the Lady White. And ending on the cliffhanger of Zatanna being hurt is a strong one. Now, in terms of the supporting characters, for the most part, they're just there. So there's just a kind of vague sense of urgency when it comes to getting them out of the astral plane. She's getting them because she has to, they're her crew. But outside of that, there's no connection as of yet. Adam has the most work done outside of the Lady White, and there's some solid visual foreshadowing, just in general for this book, but for him specifically. It's the kind of betrayal that will likely read better later on once one knows more about the situation and the setup and what led up to it, and also who Adam is. pages. It's a quick but fun read. A solid start for Zatanna Mini. Now as for the Lady White, how does she fare? How does she function? Is she an exciting villain? This issue does set her up as if she's going to be a big problem for Zatanna. And if you've peeked ahead at some of the other covers, you see some of her other villains potentially coming into play. I see you, Brother Knight. Also, he was there with the characters for the concept art who were going to be used. And so far, it does seem like a her problem type of threat. And there's seeds of a personal grudge that Zatanna isn't aware of. There is still strong potential for this to be linked to her father somehow. There always is. They did perform at the same theater, but that remains to be seen where that goes. And then the question for some becomes, for her to have a strong rogues gallery, do they need to be entirely divorced from everything to do with her past? Or just because of the type of character that Zatanna is that just part and parcel with creating characters for her? Does it necessarily have to be a bad thing? Could that connection rather be a strength? We'll have to see. A lot of that could come down to execution. Her character has grown over time. All of that past is building blocks. As for the look, I did a short on the Lady White, and some people really liked it. They were into it. Some said they felt it was vintage chic, and others felt that there were shades of Gaga. Lady Gaga, that is. And some liked the contrast between Z and Lady White. Others weren't so fond. They found it less interesting or dynamic. Where do you land? And as for the name, people were also mixed. Some felt it had a mysterious flair, which it's meant to because it's said in the discussion about her that people don't even know what her name was. Others felt it sounded more like a first draft kind of name. I, as always, would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of this issue of Zatanna and her rogues? What about there once more being a push to make her a more prominent DC character? And of the villains she has faced, are there any that you feel should make a comeback? Your thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Please leave them down below. While you're down there, please all the YouTube things, like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.